15 PS5 games, perfect 10s, all of them. And before you think I'm just handing out high scores to everything that looks pretty, I'm not. I've been playing games long enough to know the difference between something that's genuinely special and something that just has good marketing behind it. These 15, they earned it, every single one of them. So let's get into it. So Team Ninja looked at what From Software was doing with Elden Ring and basically said, yeah, we can do that, but make it faster, make it meaner, and put ninjas in it. And honestly, they pulled it off. Wulong actually kind of set the stage, but Nioh 3 is where they really went all in. They took everything that made the first two games great, the deep build system, the brutal combat, the yokai encounters, and just expanded everything across the board. You play as Titio, a young warrior on the path to becoming shogun. Cool premise on its own, but then his own brother unleashes a demon army on him, which, yeah, that's a rough way to find out where you stand in the family. The political backstabbing layered into the story actually goes pretty deep too. It's not just window dressing. Now, the combat is where this game lives and breathes. You've got two distinct styles you're constantly moving between. Samurai mode is grounded, weighty, all about that precise timing. Perfect blocks, reading attack windows, punishing aggression. And then ninja mode just flips the switch entirely. You're teleporting around the arena, leaving shadow clones to confuse enemies, weaving through attacks like you literally don't have a physical body. And the thing that makes it special is you can flow between both in real time, mid-combo, mid-fight. One moment you're trading blows with a demon lord, the next you're on the ceiling throwing shuriken at the back of its head. The world itself is huge and genuinely varied. Feudal Japan across multiple time periods, ancient forests, crumbling castles, mountain passes buried in snow, and scattered through all of it are these crucible dungeons that are basically the game daring you to embarrass yourself. You will die in them, repeatedly, but that's the whole point. Nioh was always about that friction, that feeling of finally cracking a boss after 10 attempts. Nioh 3 just turns that dial up even further. If the first game slapped you around, this one slaps you around and then asks if you want more. So a studio out of China that most of the gaming world had never even heard of just went and made one of the most visually stunning action games in years. Black Myth Wukong comes from Game Science, a team that dropped a CGI trailer back in 2020 and basically broke the internet, and then spent 4 more years actually delivering on that promise, which almost never happens. The game is based on Journey to the West, this 16th century Chinese novel that is genuinely one of the most beloved stories in all of Asian literature. Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, is an iconic character with centuries of cultural weight behind him, and the game treats that source material with real respect. You are a monkey warrior cutting through demons, spirits, and gods with a magic staff that extends, contracts, and transforms mid-combat. The moveset has this incredible fluidity to it. The animations alone are worth talking about, because the way your character transitions between strikes feels handcrafted in a way that most games just don't bother with anymore. And every single boss fight is operating at a scale that most games save for their final encounter. Game Science clearly just decided that every fight should feel like a climax, and somehow they sustain that energy across the entire game. There is a battle set in a blizzard against a massive wolf that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. Not because it was hard, though it was, but because the combination of the weather effects, the scale, the sound design, it was just one of those moments where you remember why you play games. And then there's the transformation system, which is this brilliant wrinkle where you can absorb the essence of defeated enemies and actually become them. Giant stone golem, fire-breathing beast, doesn't matter. If you beat it, there's a chance you can channel it. It adds this whole layer of experimentation on top of the already deep combat. The game also just trusts you. No quest markers screaming at you every 30 seconds, no hand-holding, no condescending tutorial pop-ups every 5 minutes. It drops you into this gorgeous, dangerous world and expects you to engage with it on its terms. And that respect for the player's intelligence makes the whole experience feel that much more rewarding. Sucker Punch already proved themselves with Ghost of Tsushima, a game that had absolutely no right to be as good as it was. Beautiful, focused, respectful of its setting in a way that even Japanese players responded to. So when they announced they were going back to that world, bigger budget, built from the ground up for PS5, the expectations were already sky high. And from everything we've seen, Ghost of Yōtei just clears them. You play as Atsu, a woman who has spent 16 years, tracking down the 6 people responsible for destroying her family. That is not a revenge arc, that is a revenge career. And what's interesting about her as a protagonist is that she's not a samurai by title or by tradition. She's just someone who got very good at violence out of pure necessity, which gives her this different energy compared to Jin from the first game. The setting moves 300 years forward and shifts north to Ezo, which is the historical name for Hokkaido. And visually, the game is doing things that are hard to even describe. Fields of wildflowers stretching to the horizon, mountain ranges buried in snow, forests wrapped in fog that catch light in a way that makes you stop moving just to look at it. The PS5 hardware is clearly being pushed here in a way the first game on PS4 simply couldn't match. The combat builds on everything Tsushima established: the stance system, the weight of each sword strike, that deeply satisfying parry timing, and expands it with new weapons you actually have to seek out by finding masters scattered across the map. The stealth is back too, and apparently even more refined. That whole fantasy of ghosting through an enemy camp in complete silence, picking people off one by one from the shadows, never gets old. Tsushima nailed that loop, and Yōtei seems to be pushing it further. The story also sounds like it goes beyond just the revenge premise. Atsu picks up people along the way who genuinely change her, which is exactly the kind of character work that made Jin's arc in the first game land so hard. It sold over 3 million copies in its opening weeks, which for a brand new IP with a female lead in a historical setting is a genuinely impressive number. And there's a free multiplayer component coming where you and friends take on supernatural threats together, which, if it's anything like Legends from the first game, is going to have serious staying power. PS5 owners really don't have an excuse to sleep on this one. Remaking Silent Hill 2 was one of the most dangerous assignments in gaming. The original is not just a great horror game, it is considered by a lot of people to be the greatest horror game ever made. The atmosphere, the symbolism, the way it uses psychological horror instead of just throwing monsters at you, it set a standard in 2001 that almost nothing has matched since. So when Konami handed the remake to Bloober Team, a studio best known for smaller atmospheric horror games like Layers of Fear and The Medium, the reaction from the fanbase was not warm. People were genuinely worried, and that skepticism was not unreasonable. But they actually did it. Against a lot of odds, Bloober Team delivered something that honors the source material while translating it into a modern experience that works on its own terms. The story follows James Sunderland, a man who receives a letter from his wife Mary telling him to come find her in Silent Hill. The problem is that Mary has been dead for 3 years, and James goes anyway. That setup sounds simple, but the deeper you get into it, the more layers it reveals. And this is a game that is fundamentally about guilt, grief, self-deception, and the way trauma can warp a person's entire perception of reality. The monsters in Silent Hill 2 are not random creatures. They are manifestations of James's psychological state, and once you understand that, the whole game recontextualizes itself in a way that is genuinely unsettling. On PS5, the presentation is extraordinary. The fog system alone is worth talking about. That thick, suffocating mist that keeps visibility low and makes every alleyway and corridor feel like it could be hiding anything. The sound design is doing heavy lifting throughout. Every distant scream, every metallic scrape, every whispered sound that you can't quite place. It gets under your skin in a way that cheap jump scares never could. And then Pyramid Head shows up. And if you don't know who Pyramid Head is, I genuinely envy you getting to experience that for the first time. He's one of the most iconic and deeply unsettling enemies in all of gaming, and the remake does him justice in a way that had fans exhaling with relief. This is not horror that forgets about you when you put the controller down. This is the kind that lingers. Machine Games getting the Indiana Jones license was one of those announcements that made a lot of people nervous and excited at the same time. Nervous because licensed games have a long and painful history of being cash grabs. Excited because Machine Games spent years making the Wolfenstein reboots, which were genuinely excellent first-person action games with real cinematic weight behind them. So if any studio was going to understand how to make you feel like a specific character through a first-person perspective, it was probably these guys, and they absolutely delivered. The game slots itself into the existing timeline between Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, which is a smart creative decision because it keeps everything feeling canonical without having to rewrite anything. You are in the golden era of Indiana Jones, fedora, leather jacket, the whole thing. And the locations are genuinely globetrotting in the classic adventure serial tradition. The Vatican, Egyptian ruins, ancient temples buried in jungle. Each environment is built with this incredible attention to period detail that makes the world feel lived in and real. The first-person perspective was the thing people pushed back on initially, and honestly, the concern made sense, because you lose that iconic silhouette, you lose seeing the hat and the jacket. But once you're actually playing it, the decision clicks. Cracking the whip from your own point of view, feeling the weight of a punch you're throwing, grabbing a random object off a shelf and using it as a weapon, it creates this visceral sense of presence that a third-person camera just wouldn't give you in the same way. You are not watching Indiana Jones, you are being him. The puzzle design deserves real credit too, because they aren't just environmental decoration. The camera mechanic, where you photograph clues and piece together archaeological mysteries, actually makes you engage your brain, and when something clicks, it gives you that genuine satisfaction of feeling like an intelligent person who figured something out, rather than just following a glowing trail. And the combat has this wonderful scrappiness to it. Indy is not a superhero. He's a guy who wins fights by being resourceful and a little reckless. Whip, fists, and whatever happened to be within arm's reach. Shovel, frying pan, a bottle, doesn't matter. It all feeds into this chaotic, improvisational energy that is exactly how Indy fights in the movies. The story has the humor, the impossible set pieces, the villain you genuinely enjoy watching be evil. It captures something that is really hard to manufacture, that specific feeling of a classic adventure, like you just stepped inside one of those films and they handed you the controls. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is one of those games that will absolutely not appeal to everybody and is completely unbothered by that fact. Warhorse Studios built something that is almost aggressively committed to its own vision of what a medieval RPG should be. And that vision is, what if we just simulated actually living in the 15th century and made you deal with all of it? You are Henry, son of a blacksmith, not chosen by prophecy, not secretly a demigod, not carrying some ancient bloodline. Just a guy from a small town in Bohemia who gets caught up in events way larger than himself. And the game reinforces that ordinariness through its systems constantly. You need to eat real food at reasonable intervals or your stats start degrading. You need to sleep or your concentration goes. Your clothes accumulate dirt and wear, and NPCs in this world will actually change how they speak to you based on how you present yourself. Show up to a noble's court looking like you just crawled out of a ditch, and people will treat you like it. The combat has a reputation, and that reputation is earned. When you first pick up a sword in this game, it will humble you. The directional system, the feints, the clinches, the stamina management, it does not play like any other action RPG. It plays like two untrained people desperately trying not to get stabbed. But then something happens after enough hours with it. It starts to click. You start reading your opponent's stance, baiting openings, timing your stripes with actual intention. And when it clicks, a sword fight in this game feels more real and more tense than almost anything else in the genre. It genuinely is chess with swords. That description is not an exaggeration. The open world is dense with simulated life in a way that most games only gesture toward. Villages have their own social ecosystems, people have schedules and relationships and memories. If you steal from someone and get caught, that follows you. The reputation system has real teeth. You can talk your way through a lot of situations if you've invested in the right skills, which creates this genuine sense that there are multiple valid approaches to almost every problem. Henry's friendship with Hans Capon is one of the best NPC relationships in recent memory. Genuinely funny, occasionally aggravating, feels like a real dynamic between two people from completely different social worlds who somehow ended up relying on each other. And yes, you get a dog named Mutt, who is both useful in combat and tracking, and also just a very good boy. This is a game for people who want to feel genuinely immersed rather than just entertained. It demands patience and gives back something most games can't. Hideo Kojima is operating on a completely different frequency from every other game director alive, and Death Stranding 2 on the beach is the clearest proof of that yet. The man made the first Death Stranding, a game where the central activity is delivering packages across a post-apocalyptic America, and somehow convinced millions of people that it was one of the most emotionally affecting experiences in gaming. And then he made a sequel that apparently takes everything that was already strange and personal and ambitious and just pushes it further into territory that is genuinely hard to describe without spoiling. Sam Bridges is back, still played by Norman Reedus, with this quiet, weathered energy that really works for the character. And the world he's moving through is even more fractured and hostile than before. New BT variants, new human factions with their own agendas, new environmental threats that make traversal feel consistently dangerous. The story goes to places that require you to just surrender to it and trust that Kojima is building towards something, which he is, even when it feels like the narrative is doing 17 things at once. The criticism of the first game was always the walking, and Kojima actually engaged with that feedback. The sequel has meaningfully expanded action. The combat systems are more developed, there's more variety in how missions and encounters play out. But the soul of it is still the traversal, still the mountain climbing and river crossing and infrastructure building. And if that loop connected with you the first time, it is even more refined here. The asynchronous multiplayer remains one of the most genuinely inspired ideas in modern gaming. Other players leave structures, ropes, vehicles, signs in your world without ever being present, and you do the same for them. It creates this sense of quiet collaboration with strangers that somehow feels more meaningful than most games with actual multiplayer modes. Visually, the game is doing things on PS5 hardware that make you stop and just sit with a shot for a moment. The cast reads like a film festival lineup. This is Kojima making exactly what he wants to make with no compromises, which means it will not be for everyone, and he genuinely does not seem to care about that. There is nothing else like it. That is both its limitation and its greatest strength. So picture every genre you love crammed into a single game, and somehow it actually works. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is a crime drama, a JRPG, a creature collector, a business sim, a resort builder, and a love letter to Hawaii all at the same time. And I know that sounds like someone just listed random things, but the game genuinely juggles all of it without any of it feeling half-baked. You've got two protagonists this time, Ichiban Kasuga, who is genuinely one of the most endearing and ridiculous main characters in gaming history, a guy who literally perceives his life through the lens of classic JRPGs, and the game just fully commits to that bit. And then Kiryu, the Dragon of Dojima, one of the most iconic characters in the entire Yakuza series, carrying his own storyline that runs parallel to Ichiban's and hits completely differently in terms of tone and emotional weight. The turn-based combat is spectacular and completely unhinged in the best way. Swinging a bicycle at a guy, summoning an army of crustaceans, calling in orbital laser strikes, the game never runs out of ways to make a regular fight feel like an event. And the Sujimon system, which is essentially Pokemon but with street toughs and gang members, is way more fleshed out than it has any right to be. Hawaii as a setting is gorgeous and packed with things to do. Dates, mini-games, side businesses, a full island resort building mode that could honestly be its own standalone game. The content density is kind of staggering. But underneath all the chaos and comedy is a story that will genuinely wreck you emotionally. The writing understands these characters deeply, and Kiryu's arc in particular, without getting into specifics, is the kind of storytelling that reminds you why this series has such a devoted fan base. 60 hours in, and it is still finding new ways to surprise you. Just play it. Monster Hunter Wilds is Capcom taking the foundation of one of gaming's greatest gameplay loops and rebuilding it at a scale that feels genuinely next generation. If you've never touched Monster Hunter, the concept is elegant. Pick a weapon, hunt a massive creature, use what you harvest to build better gear, then go hunt something even more dangerous. That loop is deeply satisfying on its own. Wilds just expands every dimension of it. The maps are fully open ecosystems now rather than segmented zones, and they are alive in a way previous games weren't. The weather system is dynamic and consequential. A sandstorm rolls in and the entire desert biome shifts, different creatures emerge, visibility drops, the whole energy of the map changes. It makes the world feel like it actually exists independent of your presence in it. The dual weapon system is a genuinely smart addition. Carrying two completely different weapon types and flowing between them mid-hunt opens up so much tactical flexibility and makes every hunter feel more versatile without sacrificing the depth of individual weapon mastery. The monster roster is doing incredible work. Every creature has its own behavioral patterns, its own tells, its own way of moving through the environment. Some are terrifying, some have this bizarre charm to them. All of them will punish overconfidence in a way that keeps encounters feeling respectful and tense, no matter how deep into the game you are. Four-player co-op against something the size of a city block, everyone contributing, everyone with a role, and then that moment when it finally goes down, there are very few feelings in gaming that match it. And Capcom put real work into the onboarding this time, so if previous Monster Hunter games felt impenetrable, Wilds is genuinely the best entry point the series has ever had. This game right here, you have to understand the cultural weight of what Hollow Knight Silksong's development cycle became. Team Cherry announced it in 2019 as what was initially a free content update that grew into a full sequel, and then it just existed in this limbo for years. No release date, occasional silence broken by a trailer, then more silence. It became a running joke across every gaming community on the internet. Silksong memes were everywhere. People were genuinely starting to wonder if it was vaporware. And then September 4th, 2025, it just dropped, and the internet lost its mind. And it was worth it. Every meme, every year of waiting completely justified. You play as Hornet this time, who is this mysterious and deadly side character in the first game, and playing as her it feels completely distinct from the original Knight. She is faster, more aerial, her movement has this whipping, aggressive momentum to it that rewards aggression in a way the first game's more measured pace didn't. Threading her needle through a crowd of enemies feels incredible when it clicks. The kingdom of Farloom is enormous and visually stunning in that way Team Cherry has that nobody else quite replicates. Glowing coral caverns, gilded cities with this eerie mechanical quality, misty open fields that feel peaceful right up until they aren't. Every biome looks handcrafted, like actual artwork that happens to also want you dead. The Silk tool system adds real build variety on top of the already refined combat. Red tools for offense, blue and yellow for utility and survival, and mixing them to suit your playstyle gives the game this layer of personalization that keeps it fresh across the whole runtime. And the bosses in this game are something special. Each one is this carefully designed test of everything you have learned, pushed to its absolute ceiling. You will lose, repeatedly. But Silksong has this quality the best action games share, where defeat always feels instructive rather than cheap. You know what you did wrong. You go back in, you improve, and when you finally clear something that was destroying you, the feeling is enormous. The soundtrack is beautiful, the world building is dense and mysterious and rewards attention, and it's sold over 7 million copies, which for a $20 indie game is a staggering number that reflects exactly how much goodwill Team Cherry built with the original. There is even a free expansion called Sea of Sorrow coming in 2026. $20, one of the best games in its genre ever made, costs $20. That is genuinely absurd, in the best way possible. Look, Square Enix has had a rough stretch, and most people who follow the industry know it. Questionable decisions, games that missed the mark, live service experiments nobody was asking for. So when Final Fantasy VII Rebirth landed and it was genuinely exceptional, it felt like a collective exhale from everyone who grew up with this franchise. This is the second chapter of the remake trilogy, picking up immediately after Remake ended with Cloud and the crew escaping Midgar. And the moment you walk out of that city into the open world for the first time is a genuine wow moment. After an entire game set in a cramped industrial city, suddenly you're standing in these massive green grasslands with the sky above you and the world stretching out in every direction. It hits hard. And the world is actually filled with things worth doing, which is not a given in open world games. The side content has real narrative substance, the minigames are genuinely varied, and some of them are surprisingly deep. And the environments keep changing in ways that maintain visual interest across the whole runtime. Green countryside, sunny coasts, deserts, and then the Gold Saucer, this enormous neon theme park stuffed with attractions that could honestly occupy you for hours on its own. The combat system is one of the best in any action RPG right now. Real-time sword swinging with strategic ATB resource management underneath, and every party member feels genuinely distinct. Barrett is a mid-range damage dealer who controls space. Aerith is fragile, but her magic ceiling is enormous. Tifa is an aggressive close-range fighter who builds momentum through combos. And Red 13 is finally fully playable, and he is an absolute force. His whole kit feels unique in a way that rewards learning his specific rhythms. The story is where it gets genuinely bold. Even if you played the original Final Fantasy VII and think you know exactly where this is going, Rebirth makes decisions that are surprising and emotionally gutting in ways that sparked real conversation. There are moments in this game that hit with a weight I was not prepared for. 70 hours and it earns most of them. If you have any affection for this era of RPG storytelling, this is essential. A studio called Sandfall Interactive, based in France, made their first ever game, and it won the Game Award for Game of the Year. Their first game, not their third or fourth after building up experience and reputation, their first. That almost never happens. That is one of the most remarkable debut stories in the history of the medium, and the game absolutely earns every piece of recognition it received. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a turn-based RPG, and I know some people hear that and immediately check out, but stay with me, because what this game does with that format is genuinely new. The premise is this. Every year, a mysterious entity called the Paintress descends and paints a number on a monolith. Every person alive who is that age or older ceases to exist instantly, just gone. And this year, she is about to paint 33. So a group of people, all age 33 and younger, form Expedition 33 and set out to stop her before the number drops again. That is a premise with immediate emotional stakes built right into its bones. The combat looks like a traditional turn-based system on the surface, and then it reveals itself. Enemy attacks require real-time dodging and parrying. Counters have timing windows you have to actually hit. It demands active attention and skill in a way that completely eliminates the passive clicking that makes some people bounce off the genre. The comparison to Final Fantasy meeting Dark Souls sounds like hyperbole, but it is genuinely accurate to how it feels in practice. Visually, the game draws from French Belle Époque art and symbolism and creates this aesthetic that is simultaneously gorgeous and deeply unsettling. Dreamlike environments, enemies that look like they crawled out of a surrealist painting, a color palette that feels entirely its own. There is nothing that looks quite like it. The characters are written with real care, and the story operates on an emotional frequency that will genuinely hurt you at points, in the best way. 5 million copies sold, 9 awards, including the biggest one in the industry, the highest user rating in Metacritic history for a debut title, for 20 developers working out of France on their first project. Absolutely unbelievable. This might genuinely be the most important game release this entire console generation. Elden Ring already had somewhere in the region of 200 hours of content, depending on how deep you went, and From Software looked at that and decided to add what is functionally an entire second game on top of it. Shadow of the Erdtree is not DLC in the way most people think of DLC. Calling it that genuinely undersells what it is. This is a massive, fully realized expansion with its own world, its own lore, its own weapons, its own bosses, and its own narrative thread that adds crucial context to the base game's story. You follow the trail of Miquella into the realm of Shadow, a hidden land that existed behind the Erdtree the entire time, unseen and sealed away. And the moment you cross over and see the Scadu tree glowing in the distance across this vast new landscape, it is one of those genuine video game moments. Goosebumps immediately. The zones are varied and gorgeous and consistently surprising. Open, sun-scorched plains, collapsed ruins with architecture that tells stories through their destruction, forests that get progressively darker and more wrong the deeper you go. Every area has its own identity and its own set of things waiting to ambush you. And then, the bosses. If you thought you had a handle on how difficult From Software is willing to push their encounters, Shadow of the Erdtree recalibrates that entirely. These are some of the hardest fights the studio has ever designed. There is a particular boss in this expansion that I will not name that destroyed me more times than I can accurately count, and when I finally cleared it, I made sounds I am not entirely proud of. That specific cycle of punishment and eventual triumph is what From Software has always been about, and this expansion delivers it at its absolute peak. The new weapon categories open up entirely fresh build possibilities. Fist weapons, stab shields, things that behave in ways you genuinely haven't seen before in this engine. The lore fills in gaps while opening new questions, which is exactly how From Software storytelling works, and exactly why people spend hundreds of hours in their wikis. You do have to earn your way in by clearing 2 of the base game's harder bosses first, which is the right call. This is not content for someone still finding their footing. But if you have put the time in, Shadow of the Erdtree feels like the final chapter of something genuinely legendary. So, the team behind Persona 5, which is already one of the most celebrated JRPGs ever made, decided to step completely outside their comfort zone and build something from scratch. No Persona brand, no existing IP to fall back on, just a completely original world and concept. And what they made is Metaphor ReFantazio, which feels like every lesson Atlas has learned across decades of RPG development poured into something entirely new. The premise is immediately distinctive. You are trying to become king of a fantasy realm, but the succession is decided by a popularity vote among the people. So you are simultaneously fighting monsters, navigating political intrigue, and running what is essentially a fantasy election campaign. That combination sounds strange, and it is, but it creates this momentum and time pressure that makes the whole game feel urgent in a way most RPGs don't manage. The combat system is genuinely smart about respecting your time. Weaker enemies can be dispatched in real-time action, just wade in and clear them without entering a full battle screen. But tougher encounters snap into a deep turn-based system that demands actual strategic thinking. It's the game being honest with you about when it needs your full attention and when it doesn't, which is a design philosophy more RPGs should adopt. The archetype system, which is essentially the job system, is enormous, somewhere around 40 different classes that your characters can learn and master, with the ability to carry abilities across archetypes and mix and match to create genuinely custom builds. The depth there is staggering if you want to engage with it. The world itself is this dark fairy tale aesthetic that feels unlike anything else in the genre. It has real things to say about class, prejudice, and political power, but it delivers those themes through the world itself rather than stopping to lecture you, which is the right way to do it. The visual design of the menus and UI is doing that thing Atlas does, where even navigating your inventory feels stylish. The music is exceptional, the characters are written with real warmth and specificity, the dungeons are actually enjoyable to move through, which is genuinely not guaranteed in this genre. This is one of the most creatively ambitious RPGs in years, and it lands almost everything it attempts. Absolute must play. Astro Bot has absolutely no business being this good. On paper, it is a game about a small robot jumping around collecting things, which sounds like something you would find bundled with a console as a tech demo and forget about in a week. Instead, it is one of the best platformers ever made, and I genuinely mean that. Not one of the best on PS5, one of the best in the genre, full stop. What Team Asobi did is treat every single level as an opportunity to introduce a completely new idea. Not a reskin, not a slight variation on something you already did, an entirely new concept built around a specific mechanic that then gets explored and discarded before it overstays its welcome. One level, you are shrunk down to ant scale, navigating a world that is suddenly enormous and threatening. The next, you are riding a sponge that absorbs water and grows massive. Then you have a jetpack. Then you are throwing shurikens. Then the game just casually drops a level that looks and sounds like it was ripped straight from the PS1 era as a bit, and it is charming and perfect. The creativity is relentless, and it never runs dry. The DualSense implementation is the best showcase the controller has ever had. The haptic feedback distinguishes between surfaces in ways that genuinely surprise you. Glass feels different from sand, feels different from metal, feels different from water, and your hands know it before your brain processes it. It sounds like a gimmick, and then you actually feel it and you understand why the controller was designed this way. The boss fights are inventive and challenging without ever feeling mean. The secret levels are genuinely difficult and reward the most committed players. And the PlayStation fan service woven throughout is this wonderful celebration of the whole history of the platform. Little robot versions of Kratos, Aloy, Nathan Drake, Ratchet and Clank, characters from across decades of PlayStation history, tucked into corners and hidden areas waiting to be discovered. Every one of them lands. In a generation full of dark, heavy, demanding experiences, Astro Bot is pure, uncut joy. It is a reminder that the highest form of game design is making something that feels effortless to play while being incredibly difficult to make. This game is exactly that. 15 games, 15 perfect 10s. And honestly, putting this list together just reminded me how good of a time it is to own a PS5 right now. Like genuinely, across every genre, every style of game, there is something on this list for almost any kind of player. Whether you want something that destroys you, something that makes you cry, something that makes you laugh, or something that just makes you feel like a kid again, it is all here. If any of these caught your attention, seriously, just pick one and dive in. You are not going to regret it. And if you think I missed something that deserved a spot on this list, let me know in the comments because I love talking about this stuff. Thanks for watching.